This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning and welcome to the Monday morning break with me, Marie. Sorry for a slight delay there. We're 2 minutes late starting the show due to some technical difficulties, but we are now here and we're live.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So good morning and welcome to everyone. As I said, I'm sorry a couple of minutes late starting because I had to quickly start the show again, but we are here and I'm really looking forward to speaking to Jade and Neris this morning about our fascination with true crime, crime shows, horror, all of those kind of things, and potentially what the impact is on young people. Really looking forward to getting into that. So good morning, Jade.
Morning.
Morning, and good morning, Neris.
Morning.
Morning. Lovely to have you both on. As I said, really looking forward to this because I am quite a fan myself, and I don't really know why. So why is it that I will sit, especially if I've had a really busy week, and will just really enjoy watching something to do with crime or something a bit scary? And that led me to think, like, what is it about it? Why do we enjoy it? I think we also all know that we have a lot of students who are really, really into it. And that just sort of led me thinking to, is there an impact on teaching and learning? Let's get going. So Neris, I know that you quite like true crime as well.
Yeah.
So what is it that you think? Have you got any sort of thoughts on why we like it?
I think for me, I really like true crime, but I can't stand horror.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's not the element of being scared, because I don't like being scared.
Yeah.
But then I will engage in true crime, which can be scary, especially if it's like a female victim or anything like that. But I personally think it's anxiety relieving.
Oh, okay.
So I think I watch it. So if ever I'm in a situation like that, I know potential ways of escaping.
That's true. Yeah.
Or like how people have reacted in that situation. So it's almost like if I watch it,
you're prepared.
I'm
almost.
prepared.
Yeah.
So I think that's how I see it. But then I can't watch a horror, which is pretty much the same kind of thing. Yeah. So you would think I would be more inclined to watch something that's not true.
Did you feel like it heightened? Because funnily enough, I was reading something on it not so long ago, and it's basically saying that when you feel sort of over-prepared for it, you're sort of then kind of in a constant state of like, well, this could happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does it ever feel like, overly cautious?
Well, maybe in some senses, but I read up on something like that as well, that's saying that even though men are more likely, I think it's like 1.1% more likely to be a victim than women, we fear it more.
Oh, gotcha.
Really?
Yeah.
So men are more likely to be a victim of a violent crime,
but women fear
it more. That's really interesting, isn't it?
So then I think the more fearful you are, the more interested you are in true crime, because it's almost like relieving some of that fear by knowing
interesting
the crimes that are out there.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it? So I, in thinking about why I particularly enjoy it, but also, as you were saying as well, Neris, like I used to love horror. Like I used to absolutely love horror films. But the older I get, I can't. I can't watch them as much anymore, but I will still read them. I love to read a horror book.
Yeah.
But so I don't know why that's changed. I don't know if there's something about getting older. I mean, there probably is. But yeah, so I was reading quite a lot of interesting things about it, about the effect of watching horror. And one of the things that they were saying is that the music and the sound effects. So there was this piece of research done, and it was actually in Indonesia. I'm just going to find the bit that I found. But there's something about the noises in the films that make it more scary.
Yeah.
And that sort of fits, I guess, with why I can still read them.
That's true.
Yeah, because I'm controlling then.
Yeah.
Sort of. But yeah, it was saying that if you're sensitive to sound and sight, and then they've got this music playing, and it really adds to the tension and the anxiety, and then you kind of associate then those noises with the fear, so it can have a big impact that way. But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
Well, that's true, because if you watch a horror film on mute,
it's not scary.
I don't think it would be as scary, because you wouldn't get the jump scare of, when someone walks in a room and all you can hear is breathing,
like the tension,
and and then tension music, and then suddenly a door slams. But if you haven't got the noise, you wouldn't know a door was slamming.
No, so why do we like that feeling?
It makes you feel alive.
Makes you feel alive. It does make you feel alive. Yeah. So again, in this research, they did sort of talk about that actually. That there's a lot to do with the kind of neurotransmitters and the hormone release. And so I'm just going to find the ones that it talks about. So it's saying like the adrenaline of watching a scary film can actually increase your metabolism.
Oh, wow.
So but also it can when you get that jolt, like a jump scare, it can actually help your blood pressure.
Oh wow!
Because here we go. I'm going to quote this: your systolic blood pressure increases significantly, and controlled increases in this increase the flexibility in your arteries.
Oh wow!
Is that like
yeah,
heart jolt?
Yeah, the heart jolt.
Yeah.
Wow. And if you exercise your arteries, then you're less likely to have a heart. I mean, it's quite a link.
It sounds very ironic, doesn't it? To like be really scared of something and like have that heart jolting moment.
Exactly, but then to improve your heart health. Yeah. It also talks about the like cortisol. So you get a release of cortisol watching the film, and then adrenaline. But also cortisol increases your fear memory. So apparently then your fear memory helps us avoid scary things, fearful things.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so all those jump scares could actually be good for you. Even though it doesn't feel like it in your heart.
It really doesn't feel like it.
It's weird to think about with anxiety as well, because I feel like I definitely feel not anxious when I'm watching horror films. I tend to watch films that are sort of psychological thrillers, twists. A lot of my books that I read are that as well. That's generally the plot.
Yeah.
And I always feel, it's funny because my partner always makes jokes like, for an anxious person, you love like things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I don't feel as anxious when especially because I think, it sounds a bit silly, but when you're already in that sort of hyper tension, hyper aware, and then you're watching something. So it's almost like you're kind of putting it on yourself really, because you're expecting that jump scare, you're expecting that sort of like the plot twist, and it's probably because you're already in that state of anxiety that you're almost prepared for it, I suppose, because you're already feeling sort of like overly cautious, overly aware.
But like Marie was saying, with the book and being able to read scary things, you're in control. So even though you're anxious, part of the anxiety is that you're controlling how much you engage with.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think for me, that's my thing of I might feel really anxious, but I will watch.
And it won't be
true crime, and it won't be
an issue.
No.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but I wonder if it's almost validating it. I think it's fair to say we're all anxious people here. But sometimes part of anxiety is, why am I feeling like this? So why am I feeling so anxious? And that kind of definitely adds to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's a link with I'm going to watch this thing and it is going to make me scared and fearful and jumpy, but actually it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, you can put the book down.
Yeah, that's true. And you can pause the film.
You can pause the film. Although I don't, I just tend to hold a
hide
cushion.
behind a cushion.
Yeah, I hold a cushion sort of slightly over my eyes.
Still see
So I can
it.
still see. Exactly. Okay, so I mean this is interesting, isn't it? So potentially we are drawn to these sort of crime and horror. One, maybe because it helps us feel okay about being anxious, maybe controlling that fear. Neris, you were saying as well about that link between being a victim of crime.
Yeah.
And that came up in some of the stuff that I read as well, that potentially watching it means you know what could happen. You feel informed.
Yeah, and also I think when I was talking with some of the other staff members about this, with the true crime stuff, you can connect to, because it's a real life situation, you can connect to them, and it's almost like a fear shared is a fear halved.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
So you're sharing your fear, but then it also reduces your fear.
Yeah. Because more people know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it just makes you feel sort of informed, doesn't it? I mean, actually, some of the things that I was reading, they were saying about just how popular true crime is.
Yeah,
it's incredibly
incredible.
popular, isn't it? They said 2 out of 3. So this is America, but 2 out of 3 Americans say that they are fans of true crime. The Netflix have said the Jeffrey Dahmer story was their second most popular release of all time, which is unbelievable. And 80% of all millennials say they're fans of serial killer content.
Do you think it's because it's abnormal?
Because
like you
can't
know you shouldn't.
it.
You know you
You
shouldn't be
can't.
acting that way, and that goes against all sort of human morals.
I think that's what.
So is that why it's fascinating?
Mine definitely is more so. Definitely being empathetic, being so sort of hyper aware of other people's emotions. I think when I try to, it's that classic thing of you're trying to picture or you're trying to imagine being inside their head, because I cannot comprehend some of the awful like true crime stuff that I've seen. Yeah. To me, it's almost like it's otherworldly almost. It sounds really strange, but because it's so out of our realm of understanding, that's what makes it so fascinating. Because how could you physically and mentally and emotionally, that just blows my mind. So
it's like you want to know the background as to why,
what
like
was the reason?
Their childhood, or like what is the reason? Have they got a diagnosis of some sort? I think that's because it is just so abnormal. Maybe that's why we are so intrigued.
Fascinated, and maybe an element of trying to problem solve or answer something that we can't comprehend. You're right, that I tend to find my interest in it is why, or what's happened in their past or things like that to explain it. So maybe part of it is trying to understand something that's so different to us. I mean, it definitely, one of the things that was noted on this thing as well is that actually sometimes people watch it and feel more informed about the world and more prepared about how to not be a victim. And I guess there is some of that, isn't there? I mean, certainly, even when you're watching horror films, there's that sort of, don't do that, don't go there.
Why go down to the basement?
Why are you walking down a dark road? Oh no, now you've lost your phone signal. There is sometimes there's a bit of an inevitability, isn't there, I suppose. Okay, so perhaps we're watching them out of fascination and to understand. I'd be interested if there was some links actually with different people in different careers. I wonder. I wonder if you work with people a lot that you might want to, if you're naturally fascinated by people, which I know I am.
I
am. And then we've talked about, that it might be to do with being avoiding becoming a victim of crime. And then perhaps it's to do with the hormones and the cortisol release and the adrenaline that we get from it. And then we're doing it in a bit of a controlled way.
Mm.
Did you have, both of you work, you're tutors and you tutor young people. Were any of them able to say, to you why they like them?
I was talking to one learner who says, because she absolutely loves horror,
Yeah.
serial killers, all that,
Yeah.
but enjoys horror films as well as true crime.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know why, because I was interested as to why both. Because
Yeah.
I feel like even if you're into true crime, you might not be into horror.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
And she says she doesn't want to do what they do,
Mm.
but she's interested to know why.
Yes.
So whether their childhood has altered the way they think.
Mhm.
She also said she's not sympathetic towards them, but she's interested.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's all the likes to know why and likes the backstory of horrors.
Oh,
So like sometimes when it
interesting.
comes out 3 films down the line
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
why the serial killer is
Mm.
the way they are, like Michael Myers and all that.
Yeah.
So I think it's more the background that she was interested in,
Yeah,
like how people
interesting.
tick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if they're in that, whether they are less affected by the actual horror.
Mm.
Yeah, because they're focusing more on
On
the backstory.
thinking of the backstory, that sort of thing. I mean, I know that Saw, for example, the Saw franchise. That was no. See, I think
it's just the gore aspect.
Yes, but the story I found so interesting,
too.
especially when they, later ones, when you realise all the sort of clues and things that were linked. And I thought that was really fascinating. I also think at the time when it came out, it was quite different. There hadn't really been anything like that at the time. Okay, so she's another one. She's interested in the stories. Did your students mention anything, Jay? Because I know you've got some.
One of my students in particular, she's a big fan, and we do tend to talk about it quite a lot, and it's always like sort of the famous cases. And I think it's, especially when it comes to mental health, I do think it's important to talk about with the learners.
Yes.
As much as I tend to dip into overprotective mode, like we shouldn't be watching this. It's really, especially, but then you sort of think they are exposed to it regardless, with TikTok and Twitter and whatever else, that they're going to consume it.
Yeah.
Especially when, there's a recent one, it's not so much, like I suppose it is kind of true crime with the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case.
Yes,
A lot of my students are really fascinated with that. But again, it's going back to what you said, Nerys, it's the dynamics of it more than the killing itself or the whatever it is. It's actually more so the background. So why did it lead up to that? What events happened that then led to this being this horrific thing? But I will say that I do think it can have an impact. I think even if it's just a gradual thing, I do think that I've noticed a lot that when you sort of not consumed by it, but when you sort of make it more of like a hobby, where you're sort of, like I was saying to you guys beforehand, like it's on in the background, I'm doing the washing up and I'm listening to it. And then if my students are doing that as well, if that's all they're consuming, I think that could be quite tricky, especially if they're like, oh, have you seen this new one, or this one's happened in America? And then it's sort of like, you don't want to get too caught up in it. You kind of want to consume it can you consume it in a healthy way? I don't know. But I think sometimes I tend to, just be a bit cautious, just to make sure that they are getting a bit of variety in terms of what media they're consuming, because I think it can get overwhelming, especially with, it's so popular on Netflix now with the Jeffrey Dahmer thing and everything else. It is fascinating, and you can't sort of blame them. I'll do it myself, wanting to know about it, but I just sort of think, just make sure that's not don't get too, oh my God, this is happening, have you heard this new one, and this is like, just kind of, just make sure it's sort of balanced out, because I think that can get a bit tricky.
Yeah. Well, it potentially just starts to feel like that's all that's happening in the world.
And also I think you could become desensitized
to
it. So another horrendous true crime might come out and you'll be like, oh, but it's not as bad as what they did. And thinking, but actually, if you put that on paper,
just
that's pretty horrendous.
It's awful. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do think there's a lot in what you were saying, Jade. The same as curating your social media feeds, isn't it? If all you were seeing is the negative, then it is going to affect your view of the world, isn't it? But also normalise it, like you said as well. Is there less impact if all you're listening to is these, or watching these horrendous crimes or horror? That cortisol or adrenaline or anything like that isn't going to sustain, is it, at the levels? And also I liked what you were saying about talking about it, Jade. I think it is important to talk about it because it is there. I mean, you do open up TikTok or something and it will just be there. You know, that's happened on mine and I'm like, I just don't want to see that.
Yeah.
But you don't that was the clip being shared of that ice hockey player. And that just came, and I didn't want to, and I really, really quickly scrolled. I thought I don't, and I sort of came off for a while. So, but whereas young people on them, it is just going to be coming up, isn't it? So I guess it ties into, same as anything, sort of online safety and things as well, doesn't it? And being aware of how you're feeling. But yeah, really interested. Did you have any more students that gave any more thoughts?
Not students as such, but members of staff did chime in as well. And I think one member of staff said that they just simply enjoy the jump scare. But actually now we've spoken about what that jump scare is and what it means in the body, maybe it is that, I don't know, maybe it is just the feeling of I want to be scared so that I know. It sounds so bad, but just to feel alive. You know what I mean? And feel wired. And
wired.
Wired.
It is wired, isn't
because
it?
I personally wouldn't sit and watch if I could pick a rom-com or a horror. I wouldn't pick the horror, but I would read about it, but I wouldn't want to watch
You're
it.
in control there as well. As you said.
Like if I go to the cinema, I would never ever go to the cinema and watch a horror.
Really?
I have no idea how people do it. It's too dark in that room.
See, I like that though. But then I think it goes back to what Marie was saying. I think I like the plot more than the actual, because the gore doesn't really. The gore, I'm kind of just, I don't need to see that. But then if it's a really intricate and it's 3 films before and then it's the final, that I love, and I think. But that's again, that just all my sort of genre is just psychological and thriller and twisty and I just like. I think maybe I like being surprised. Maybe I think I like being or almost just kind of a gotcha moment of I thought this was going to happen all the way through and then this has happened. It doesn't have to be horror, I suppose, but 9 times out of 10 it is.
But that also then is the same with your true crime, isn't it? That being surprised by what's happened,
at the end,
understanding why and things. Do you think is there any difference for you, the fact that some are true and some are films?
Yeah, so a lot of them, I tend to, again, just going into sort of being overly sensitive and I can't watch anything true crime related with sort of children or animals, which sounds awful because it means that I'm I kind of feel a little bit desensitized to other things because as much as I'm still feeling that tug and that feeling of, oh God, that's horrible, that's horrendous, I purposely won't watch anything that I know is going to so some of the other stuff won't be in the back of my mind, whereas sort of like animals or children or anything like that, it will be in the back of my mind. And I won't, which is really, I suppose I probably, admittedly, I'm a bit desensitized to sort of, the
adults.
The adult stuff. And I think in horror films as well, I'm the exact same. I won't watch anything with any animals or if I know it's anything around children. I think that may be, I don't know why, those are just 2 for me that I really can't.
But that's probably you have that part of the brain that's like really empathetic. They're normally like cute and innocent and they don't have the whereas adults are less innocent.
It's not that you don't it's not that you don't care as well. It's not that you're like it's happened, it's it happens every day, because you do still feel the impact of when you hear about it, but it's not as sort of gut-wrenching and playing on your mind as what sort of stuff with younger people would be, because that for me is definitely I'm kind of just sad. It's really sad.
Have declined to comment. This is the university called for the chair.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
A £1,000 cash incentive and a campaign to raise the profile of childcare workers in England has been launched as part of a recruitment drive. According to the BBC, thousands of extra nursery workers and childminders are needed as the government plan to expand funded hours begins. The Department for Education says that more than 100,000 working parents of 2-year-olds have already registered for the April rollout. However, early years charities say the campaign to recruit is too late. By September 2025, all eligible preschool children of working parents from the age of 9 months will be able to access 30 hours of term-time childcare. Research suggests that the number of childcare providers is currently falling as childminders leave the role, although the number of places remains roughly stable. Data suggests that almost 28,000 early years specialists will be needed to meet the rise in demand, an expansion of 8%. The BBC also reports that staff at Scotland's exam body will take strike action at the end of February over a pay dispute. Around 400 workers will stage 2 24-hour stoppages, and the action will also include an overtime ban, a ban on weekend working, and a ban on accruing time off in lieu. The union said the industrial action would have a major impact on the SQA's ability to prepare for exam season. But the SQA itself said it had contingency plans in place and that the strike would not have any impact at all. The Herald in Scotland also reports on calls from some quarters to raise the school starting age. A motion filed by the Glasgow Kelvin MSP calls for a national conversation on early years education and argues that a new approach could help tackle Scotland's long-standing educational attainment gap. The proposal to raise the starting age secured cross-party support in less than 24 hours. It's not the first time that the SNP have called for an increase in the starting age for pupils, but with recent concerns that the school system in Scotland is not helping to close the gap between disadvantaged pupils and their non-disadvantaged peers, the plans have appeared again. Under the plans, children would start school at 6 rather than 4 or 5, and a kindergarten stage for 3 to 6-year-olds would be introduced, increasing the amount of early years education by 12 months, replacing primary 1. The kindergarten stage would focus on learning through play. Full details of the proposal can be read online in a variety of media outlets. Finally, Schools Week covers demands from the University of Cambridge to delay the new teacher training framework. The university has said it lacks confidence in the new framework and suggests a delay of at least a year. The initial teacher training and early career framework, or ITT-ECF, was unveiled by the Department for Education at the start of February. The ITT-ECF will combine and replace the currently separate ITT core content and the ECF from September 2025. The university called for the change to be implemented no sooner than September 2026, if at all. This would allow for further consultation, it says, and revision, as the new framework was just a tweak on the current one and was a wasted opportunity. The education faculty at Cambridge also claims that the framework sets unclear and contradictory objectives for ITT providers. In the longer term, the university says the framework should be developed and led by a non-party political, cross-sector expert team. The new framework has already divided opinions in the schools community, and many have taken to social media to express concerns. The Department for Education have declined to comment. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Hey, so welcome back. I always like to take those few minutes just to listen to the news. I just find it very helpful to keep informed with everything going on. Okay, right. So let's return to our really interesting discussion on what is our sort of fascination and enjoyment with true crime and horror. We've started talking about maybe some of the reasons we do and don't like to watch them. We've sort of thought about that thing about feeling informed, so you might actually know how to not be a victim. We've talked about possible links with anxiety and sort of having control over how you're feeling. And then we talked about the surprising health benefit of jump scares, improving the flexibility of your arteries. I mean, I think, to return to this, I think, Neris, you had some interesting ideas as well about this.
Yes, when I was doing a little bit of research, I think it was interesting to know back, like whether there's actually any instinct in us, like why we're so fascinated, but because so many people around the world are. And something that came up was that evolution might say we're intrigued due to our history of the types of crimes and things that would have happened way back when, even when we were back with the cave people, because they were obviously on high alert with, hunting and making sure that their people were safe. So I think evolution definitely has something to do with it. We're programmed to survive. So therefore we are going to want to engage in or be intrigued with the type of true crimes that are going on, even if it is just blanket. Back in history, or way back when, I would probably say that, murder was probably quite a high crime. And that's something that's continued throughout life. I think evolution definitely has got something to do with it, because they're a significant part of human society.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I suppose is watching a true crime, is that the modern day equivalent of going to a hanging? Maybe.
Oh yeah,
That's a good point, actually, yeah.
Because they would all go out and watch it.
In real life. So is that now our equivalent? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Interesting.
Okay, so perhaps we've got an evolutionary link. Was there anything else that you'd come across, Jade, about why we might?
It was interesting because when you said about like the positive health effects, I could only find negative health effects, and just sort of like how it can sort of, obviously the basics, increasing your anxiety, increasing sort of, but then that's why I asked you in the beginning, is it sort of like you tend to be a bit more hyper aware and sort of, you are prepared, but you sort of tend to think things that not necessarily are actually happening, but because you're in not fight or flight mode, but you are in that sort of, the noise or someone, you're walking home, which is, scary in itself, walking home alone or doing whatever. And then you do tend to be a bit more, is that person like crossing the road because they're crossing the road? Or, you do tend to then draw back on, my goodness, I've seen 10 videos like this last month about a woman walking home on her own, or, and it does tend to sort of, it was just interesting because about the health benefits, but then also at the same time it can be quite
negative.
Yeah, definitely, because I think you can get too caught up in it. That's one of the things it was basically just saying in the article that I'd read, is that increased stress can subsequently lead to stress-related illnesses, so things like cardiovascular disease or hypertension, because you're constantly in fight or flight mode. If you are, that sort of caught up in it. But then when it gets to that point, you're then sort of, you're overly prepared and you're sort of maybe picking up on things that aren't really there, or and that can cause quite a lot of health problems, because being anxious and having anxiety anyways is sort of to always be on alert. I know one of my students was impacted by that, just more so because they tend to, the stuff that they've read about, they then put on themselves, or what if this happened to me, or what if this happened to my family, and you kind of have to have that conversation of it. Hopefully nothing like that is going to happen, but you can't really say no, because they've seen it themselves, they've seen the evidence of it, and I think that's really hard to it's tricky.
That is true, actually, because perhaps potentially then the difference between horror films and true crime. I mean, horror, you can, unless it says based on a true story, you can it's not true, especially if they tend to be kind of, I don't know, monsters or something like that. That is a story. I guess with true crime, true crime, it's not. And also, like you said, you can't reassure someone that it won't happen, because the fact is it has. Although it's unlikely.
But the evidence is they've been engaging in a true crime program. So you can't then go, no, this isn't real.
Don't worry.
It is.
Yes, that's very interesting. So I think, obviously we're going to move on and talk about the impact in the classroom, which I think is something to think about. But I think just first, I'm going to, I am being a bit devil's advocate here, because I have got some more positives.
Good.
So apparently, in the research that I've been reading, horror films are effective in helping students understand different moral values, such as justice and empathy and courage. The other one is that it can help students gain critical thinking, to making informed decisions and creative problem solving. Because apparently it encourages them to think outside the box when it comes for potential solutions for difficult problems. I mean, if we go back to my mention of the Saw franchise, I don't know. But apparently that kind of, those critical thinking skills and thinking through things like that can actually aid in them developing creative problem solving skills. And the last one I had is that actually you're exploring your fears in a safe environment, which actually can help build your resilience to coping with real life stress. So, I mean, I guess that's probably something that we did sort of touch on as well, didn't we, about ourselves, that actually you're kind of validating those feelings of anxiety, which can otherwise feel out of the blue and unmanageable, I guess. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe a little stretch that's going to give them problem-solving skills. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with the Netflix documentary Making a Murderer, that was confusing. I didn't know if it was guilty or innocent, and so it can create those sort of questions and the problem solving, and create a conversation about it.
That's true.
And I think another, I don't know if this is I think it is a positive. It can be quite cathartic. So for some people, I mean, there's been loads of studies on violent video games and stuff. But I think for some young people who are experiencing mental health challenges, or can feel quite frustrated with school life or home life or friendships, because there's so many things that they have to deal with at that age, engaging in either true crime or horrors could be a cathartic release for them. So I'm released. I would never do what they're doing, but by engaging in that content, I'm releasing those sort of feelings of anger or frustration. But then on the other hand, there has been obviously times where, like Marie was saying with the Saw franchise, it can give people ideas. So it can go either way. I think it's personal, but I do think engaging in some horrors can be quite a cathartic release, because you as a person morally would never do that. But sometimes when you're really angry and heightened, watching something like that, you release.
Interesting. That's another good one. I hadn't thought of that one. Okay. So just a quick word from our sponsors, and then we are going to finish up with impact in the classroom.
In partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
So let's move on now then to what do we think the impact in the classroom is. So we have all, been teachers and educators, and we've seen some of the impacts in the classroom. So Jade, you've mentioned a few already, but just that people can get very anxious. Yeah. And what other sort of impacts have you seen?
I think it's thinking about the positives as well. Actually, some of my learners are now really into murder mysteries, and that's tied in
a positive spin.
Yeah, it's tied in quite nicely then, because then I can sort of make it academic in a sense, because they're using problem solving skills and creative writing and things like that, and like Marie was saying, with critical thinking. So it has kind of worked in my favour to lean into their interest in true crime and things like that, because then what I usually do with my learners anyway is sort of obviously get to know what they're into, and then try and cater sort of sessions around that so that it's interesting to them. So what I've done with a lot of my students that I know are already into true crime is use like a murder mystery. We're going to do a murder mystery thing, and then they're going to then be able to use the skills that they've already sort of acquired from watching true crime. They're not even realising that they're using all these academic skills, and it's so funny to see, because then they'll be like, oh, and I'm like, look what you've just written, like look at all this stuff you've just done. And because they're not, it's so familiar to them because it's something they're already interested in. It's really helpful. And you made some good points. There is academic skills in there by being a lover of true crime, I suppose, because it is. It's problem solving. It's thinking outside the box, and I definitely think that it has its positives and its negatives for my learners. Definitely, at least quite a few of them I've noticed.
I think also for like the life skills and wellbeing modules that we do, I think when you have situations in the work, I don't know, that requires them to have sort of like a moral outlook on things, tapping into their fascination with true crime could be like, so if you were in a situation like this, or if you know of someone like this, how would you act?
Exactly.
And putting them in a situation that they've engaged in or they're familiar with, you can also like reiterate their morals and their human values through their fascination with true crime.
No, it works. It's interesting how you can kind of tap into little things without them even realising. They're just kind of like, oh, I just did all that. Yeah, you did.
That's very interesting, Jade. Like, well, both of you kind of taking that interest, you're going to have more engagement. I guess taking the more appropriate things from it. But then, like you said, Jade, that last step at the end, just showing them and telling them this is what you've done. These are the skills you've used. These are the skills you're building, the knowledge you're building, because they don't realise. So I think that's excellent. That's really good. And I think there's things to be brought into lots of different subjects, isn't there? Obviously, you can use it for English. I really liked that. And there is the life skills and that kind of moral and character education, even. I guess art, all sorts, isn't there, that you can link these kind of interests with. What do we think about the negatives then? I've got one that I've noticed before. Being really tired.
Yeah.
Actually affecting sleep, impacting sleep. I think one maybe because, I mean, this does, and I suppose this doesn't necessarily have to be true crime or horror, but binge watching and binge listening.
Yeah.
So you end up staying too late because you're absolutely hooked on it, and I'll
Yeah.
just watch one more. Or being tired because they can't sleep because they're scared.
Yeah.
So I think, and we know the impact that being tired can have on your ability to learn, ability to get up in the morning. So maybe it might be affecting attendance, and also behaviourally,
Yeah.
and emotionally.
Yeah.
So that was one that I've noticed. I don't know. Have you seen any, Maris?
I've noticed. I mean, I think it's more for horror films or those sort of horror programs. Change in language.
Oh yes,
which we've realised quite a few times. It's almost like they're so desensitised to the language used, because some of the language can be horrendous. And because they're so used to hearing it, they think, well, it's not wrong. So then I can use that in a normal setting. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes the shock reaction from the people around them is almost like, it doesn't go the way you would expect it to go. They're almost like, oh, I've got a shock factor.
It's a bit of a thrill.
It's a bit of a, so then they're getting a thrill out of almost passing on language that you would hear in a horror that is not appropriate for the classroom.
Interesting.
But the shock factor from everyone else is almost like a bit more of a thrill.
Yes.
And challenging them on that is hard, because obviously we also engage in true crime and horror and stuff. But it's almost having that level of, horrors are not real, so therefore don't bring that language into the classroom. Because they're binging it or watching so much of it, it becomes their vocabulary, which is tough to change.
That can really, especially desensitized. I do think, just going off the back of what you said about language, I do think also it tends to be that they might not see it as that bad, like what we were saying earlier about sort of like there could be a worse, inverted commas, a worse case, and to them it could be, if it is like horror, not true crime, they could sort of just be, well, it's just a film. And it's like, but that's some really graphic, really intense things that you've just witnessed. And then it's not, it is just a film, but it's sort of like, you kind of have to take a step back and sort of, look after, I know it sounds obvious, but you do have to look after yourself and your own mental well-being if you are going to consume stuff like that, because it's not normal, and it's not, it's
and the tolerance will go up.
Exactly.
So their shock factor will
need more.
You'll constantly need more.
Oh, that's interesting. So whether there's kind of, the more you watch and the more tolerant you become, whether you've got to potentially watch worse things to gain that rush.
I mean,
fear.
I've felt that before with true crime. If there's a true crime story that is, this is going to sound awful, but it's just a murder, for example, I would be less inclined to watch that than I would rather watch something that's got twists and turns of like they haven't caught the killer or because that is too straightforward. Which sounds awful because murder is not.
No,
but it's almost like that step up of, I've engaged in that kind of true crime before. I need something else.
So it is a bit thrill seeking,
as
well, isn't it? And same as anything, the more you do it, then you do, it loses its impact. But very interesting, that what we're seeing and hearing is that language coming out because it's completely normalised, and talking about the things that they're watching as if they were completely normalised. I mean, part of it, isn't it? I think I was thinking about, have films got worse? Just thinking about horror films, have they got worse or not? Or is it linked towards the fact that so many people watch them? I mean, I think even, obviously we teach older anyway in post-16, so you don't necessarily have that thing with the age certificates. But I think some 15s have watched them. Really scary, really scary. Actually, some 12s. But I don't know. I suppose I don't really know why that is. But effects arguably are so much better. It's just interesting, isn't it? I wonder whether things
But then I guess, what is also really well often quoted is The Exorcist was in the 70s.
Yeah,
and
it was
the
most terrifying.
remains one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Yeah. But now watching it, because I remember, obviously, I didn't see it until I was probably 18.
Yeah.
And by then, it'd been out for quite a few years. Watching it for me, I was like, oh, the effects on this are shocking.
Not as bad.
Because I was like, I grew up with CGI.
Yes.
But then thinking back, my dad would say that was the most terrifying film. Watching someone sit up in bed and have a head spin round.
Yeah.
There was nothing like that
That's a
in
good point, actually.
films.
Yeah.
But for us, because we've been spoiled with the effects, and I mean, look at the
Drama
sort of films
of it.
that have come out in
Oh,
our
yeah.
lifetime. Avatar, like CGI on that is
Yeah.
incredible. Horror films almost aren't that. I don't know. Well, I don't really watch horror films, but for me,
No,
horror
yeah.
films are more scary if they are just people.
Yeah.
Yes, not
So,
effects.
not
Yeah,
effects.
true.
But so yeah, like The Shining.
Yes, that's psychological.
The psychological
the
thing of like the
psychological
twins and the
side of
boy,
it.
it's the people.
definitely.
Whereas I actually did watch. I mean, I was hidden behind a pillow, but I didn't find that as scary because for me it became silly
Yes.
that he became an alien clown. Like,
Yeah, see,
that sort of the effects can go overboard and not become scary.
So I haven't watched it because I read the book
See,
and
the
I
book was
love the book.
terrifying.
Yes, and I loved the book.
Yeah.
But also I know what happens and I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, but
No.
the book was terrifying. Like Stephen King's such a great writer.
Oh,
He taps into
fantastic.
because then you start picturing the thing. Whereas the film went a little bit.
So I get what you mean.
So I do think effects can actually also make horror less scary.
Yeah, definitely.
True. Okay, so so in terms of the impacts and things that we might be seeing and dealing with as teachers and educators, so we've got the being tired and we've got the being upset and scared. We've potentially got some positives of it, how you can use their interests in it. Have we got any other impacts that you've seen or come across?
I'm trying to think of more positive ones.
Me too, because I keep thinking I'm sort of leaning towards the negatives because that's where my mind goes to first. Because you sort of think it's kind of in the name of it, isn't it? When you think true crime, you don't think, oh yeah, I was watching this really great true crime thing last night, and then it's like, oh my god, wow, and it's actually like, oh god, I watched this true crime thing last night.
Oh, it was
really awful.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Even the language when we talk about them is negative. You're right. I mean, I think the sort of findings, the summary of findings of the research that I was reading, and I think this goes back to what you were saying, Jade. It was about being able to talk about it, and it was about developing that self-awareness of how it's affecting you. I think Neris, you said as well, like just don't be watching it all the time. So you avoid that normalizing. Perhaps you avoid that tolerance building. And I think, like you said, Jade, having those conversations with your students and pupils is really important. Even if it's a strategy for managing your emotions, I guess. I mean, it sounds straightforward, but I'm not sure how much we all do it, that if something has upset you, you would talk about it. Not always. So same as if they watch something and it's really upset them, being able to come in and talk to you about it, I think is really valuable.
I think talking it through as well makes it snaps you out of the bubble of being in your room watching true crime or horror. If you then take it out of the room and talk about it, even if you just tell someone what the case was about, you're snapping out of the thing and bringing yourself to reality. So that you're not
the load almost.
Like we said, the fear shared is a fear halved. So it's almost like then you're not over analysing things just in your head
by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of it, I think it's the same as anything. I feel like there's strong links here with kind of social media use and things. It's all in a balance. I do think there's an element of knowing, children and young people are going to come across this. Even if they don't seek it out, it could be there at their friend's house, or someone says, oh, you've got to watch this. Depending on the age, there might be a bit of peer pressure in that. I mean, I know that I watched a horror film, really, really too young, but it was because I was at a birthday party, someone's birthday party, and I watched it, and then I had nightmares for about 3 weeks afterwards. I was a very sensitive child. It was not good. But, so there's always going to be all those elements, isn't there? And I guess there's kind of elements of peer pressure or not wanting to look silly. So I think having that relationship, I guess, in with other people that you can talk about how it's making you feel is really important. But this morning's been so interesting. I think there are positives and negatives. It's a fascinating subject, and like I said at the beginning, coming at this as somebody who really enjoys this as well, and I don't know why. I'm not sure I still know why.
I'm sure there's many things that could be.
But I think if anyone's, anyone else has got any thoughts on this or want to contact us, we're all. Well, I'm on X, and Jade, you're on X, aren't you? And we're contactable through that. So if anyone's got any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. But should we just do a little key takeaway from the morning? So mine has been, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, mine has been the fact that jolt is good for you, and also it can raise your metabolism. So, I mean, all those evenings when I don't go out to the gym, could just watch a horror instead.
Horror on.
I think my takeaway is I think I need to watch more horror to get that jolt.
Oh, okay, so we've actually reformed you.
Okay. It's gone the other way.
I didn't know that was going to happen this morning.
I think mine would be the same. I think kind of looking at the positives more than the sort of focus on the negatives, which I do quite a lot, but just because I'm overly cautious. But I think it's not a bad thing to sort of think.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
And sort of looking at it, taking a step back, and what we were saying about when it comes into the classroom, I think that's quite helpful as well. So I didn't know a lot of these positives, so that's kind of learn something every day.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's been a great show, and thank you so much, both of you, for making the time to come on and talk to us. And I think you're going to both return to your teaching now. Maybe take 5 minutes to just sort of process this a bit. But thank you so much, and thank you everyone who's been listening. And if you're listening back afterwards, thank you as well.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.